debba avere e sempre ha un orizzonte diverso e una visione futura che possa essere modificata. E diciamo, io penso poi che nella realtà vi sono alcune sfide sociali che l'Europa ha in mente e che si deve portare avanti sempre più in maniera pressante, che sono delle sfide sociali alle quali ci dobbiamo aprire il più presto possibile. E queste sfide sociali penso che possiate condividerle, sono soprattutto quelle legate al lavoro, il lavoro per i giovani, che deve essere un lavoro di alta intensità di conoscenze, perché è l'unico modo poi che dei paesi con la nostra cultura e con la nostra realtà possono andare avanti per il loro sviluppo. Noi in questi anni, diciamo, noi dobbiamo assistere, a mio avviso, a una profonda modifica di quella che è la società. In realtà noi sappiamo che la società è completamente cambiata agli inizi del Novecento, profondamente cambiata, ha avuto dei cambiamenti all'inizio e intorno agli anni 60, ma non così radicali come quelli del Novecento. Io penso che è il momento che l'Europa pensi a un nuovo tipo di società con un cambiamento che debba essere profondo come quello che abbiamo avuto all'inizio degli anni del Novecento. E io penso poi che l'Europa, se il presidente Barroso me lo consente, debba avere anche una politica estera un po' diversa, non appiattita su quella che sono gli Stati Uniti, perché sono convinto che non è bombardando qualcosa si possa portare la pace all'interno e l'unione di queste realtà, ma ci sono altri metodi per poter conquistare e poter vedere effettivamente come risollevare ed essere in maniera unitaria. Con Barroso io penso e con Horizon 2020 l'Europa sta facendo uno sforzo veramente enorme, e voi sapete che il Sabato delle Idee è particolarmente dedicato a Horizon 2020 perché è l'unico modo per avere una idea futura, un'idea condivisa. E voglio qui ricordare che Horizon 2020 deve avere, a mio avviso, e quello che noi stiamo cercando di fare nel nostro piccolo con un comitato di giovani che tra poco diventerà attivo dopo una selezione che stiamo in corso di fare, stiamo facendo, che potrà dare effettivamente una nostra sviluppo. Io penso che noi dobbiamo pensare all'Europa in una maniera diversa, dobbiamo avere delle collaborazioni vere e non di facciata, dove molto spesso le invidie, le gelosie, le piccole beghe prevalgono su un'idea di collaborazione intensa e reale che possa contribuire allo sviluppo. Dobbiamo certamente lottare tutti insieme per avere una maggiore quantità di fondi, però dobbiamo anche essere chiari che questa maggiore quantità di fondi va usata riducendo la burocrazia che è messa per evitare alcune cose che poi in realtà non riesce completamente ad evitare. Io penso, e voglio finire ritornando un momento a SDN, che come ha fatto e sta facendo SDN di Unione Europea, anche noi, la Campania, tutti noi dobbiamo passare in una maniera europea e collaborare sempre di più a un'Europa. Io sono convinto che dobbiamo ancora ringraziare i nostri genitori che hanno avuto l'idea brillantissima di creare e di realizzare l'Europa in questi anni, che questa Europa vada meglio indirizzata e meglio vista, e non dobbiamo ora, diciamo, preoccuparci per quella crisi economica sul quale l'euro può avere avuto una sua importanza, una sua relativa importanza, ma noi dobbiamo pensare effettivamente all'Europa in una maniera completa, perché è l'unica possibilità di sviluppo di tutte le nostre zone e in particolare del Sud Italia. Vi ringrazio e naturalmente il professore Lucio D'Alessandro che è il maestro di casa. Lucio, naturalmente vi ringrazio a te per tutto e prego.
Presidente Barroso, noi siamo davvero onorati in questo momento. Questa università, con i suoi 5 secoli di storia, con i suoi 10.000 studenti, con i suoi tanti docenti, è onorata in questo momento di avere la sua sua presenza, la presenza del collega, di un altissimo rappresentante delle istituzioni europee che ne ha fatto la migliore storia, ne ha costruito la migliore storia e continuerà a costruirla, di averla tra queste nostre mani. Davvero per noi è una grandissima emozione, per noi, per i nostri studenti, per noi tutti, davvero grazie. Noi crediamo profondamente. Nell'Europa noi crediamo profondamente. Il mio maestro, il mio compianto maestro Antonio Villani, che è stato rettore di questa università, diceva sempre: l'Italia per entrare nel futuro deve tenersi saldamente aggrappata all'Europa, deve tenersi saldamente aggrappata alle Alpi per poter poi svolgere anche il suo ruolo nel Mediterraneo. E credo che l'Europa, lo ricordava il professore Salvatore, sia stata una intuizione straordinaria dei nostri padri fondatori e ci abbia regalato, oltre alla possibilità di riaprire lo spazio della République des Lettres, che è stata, diciamo, il fondamento, diciamolo pure, della cultura internazionale, ci abbia anche consentito proprio l'istituzione europea uno straordinario spazio di pace, di una pace che non si è mai vista in Europa così a lungo e con uno sguardo così lontano verso il futuro. Quindi dobbiamo non solo credere, ma dire anche grazie all'Europa. Abbiamo intitolato questa giornata di oggi Sulla porta dell'Europa, perché ci sembra sempre che, come dire, questa porta qualche volta sia stretta, che qualche volta le regole dell'Europa siano difficili, che le regole non comprendano tutti, che qualche volta l'Europa lasci. Le regioni meridionali sono certamente quelle più in difficoltà per tante ragioni, anche per ragioni strutturali, anche per ragioni proprie, ma è chiaro che nei momenti di sofferenza guardano all'Europa e si domandano se l'Europa fa tutto quello che può per allargare la sua porta, per fare in modo che entriamo tutti davvero dentro questa porta. Lei ha compiuto una straordinaria esperienza e continuerà a compierla per l'Europa. Ecco, da lei vogliamo delle indicazioni, da lei vogliamo sapere se questa porta dell'Europa sarà una porta abbastanza larga per lo spazio comune e che nessuno rimanga fuori. E questa è la domanda e questo è l'appello che le rivolgiamo. Le rivolgiamo inoltre, abbiamo visto, la sua attenzione per questa città, la sua attenzione per i nostri giovani, la sua attenzione per il patrimonio di cultura che ieri lei è stato a Pompei e è andato a visitare. Le rivolgiamo l'appello perché ci continui a stare vicino nel corso degli anni che verranno. Ieri, durante una conversazione a tavola, nasceva un'idea. C'è la Villa dei Papiri, la grande Villa dei Papiri ad Ercolano, di cui è stato scavato un solo strato, e quello strato ha ridato al mondo alcuni papiri che hanno riaperto la cultura antica della Grecia e della latinità. Ci sono ancora 9 strati da scavare. È una grande missione di cultura mondiale. Per questa missione noi vorremmo impegnare nel futuro il presidente Barroso perché sia ancora con noi e perché compia ancora un'opera storica a favore di quella cultura per la quale tanto si è battuto. A questo punto do la parola per presentare il nostro presidente al professor Alfonso Mattera di Ricigliano, direttore scientifico della Fondazione Collegio Europeo di Parma, ma soprattutto consigliere della Commissione e la persona che di fatto ci ha fatto il suo regalo, perché ha organizzato questo evento. Grazie.
Grazie signor Rettore. Ecco, penso che il progetto europeo, il progetto di integrazione europea possa essere definito come il disegno politico più profondamente umano degli ultimi 2 millenni di storia. Perché questo? Perché ha riconciliato gli europei dopo un millennio di guerre fratricide e, ricordiamoci, ogni 20 anni c'era una guerra in Europa. Il gesto di riconciliazione, il vincitore, la Francia che tende la mano al vinto, la Germania, e gli propone di spartire in un certo qual senso il bottino di guerra, il carbone d'acciaio. Un gesto che non si era mai verificato nella storia dell'umanità. Un progetto che ha reso le guerre non soltanto impossibili, ma impensabili. E ricordiamoci, le guerre non sono relegate nell'archivio della storia. Le abbiamo viste a pochi chilometri da noi, pensiamo alle guerre nei Balcani, guerre che ci hanno ricordato gli orrori della seconda guerra mondiale, gli orrori di Auschwitz. Un progetto che ha consentito di riunificare dal 1950 ad oggi tutti gli europei in uno spazio privilegiato dalla speranza umana, dove regna la pace, la giustizia, il rispetto della dignità umana. E io sono convinto che ogni essere umano che non faccia parte del nostro spazio desidererebbe viverci. Alla domanda che spesso faccio, e l'ho spesso ripetuto anche ieri, dove desiderate vivere? Nessuno ha mai risposto in un'entità geopolitica diversa dall'Europa. Ricordiamoci, è soltanto in Europa che si vive bene, perché soprattutto il rispetto della dignità umana, dei diritti fondamentali è garantito. Eppure questo progetto ha avuto come, direi, spinta unificatrice le crisi. E questo può sembrare strano, paradossale. Tutte le tappe della costruzione europea sono state attraversate da crisi talvolta profonde, laceranti, talvolta esistenziali. Ed è lo stesso architetto del progetto europeo, José Manuel, che ce lo aveva previsto. L'Europa si costruirà con le crisi, l'Europa sarà la somma delle soluzioni che sapremo apportare a queste crisi. E la storia lo ha dimostrato. Ognuna di queste crisi però ha portato ad una conquista. Io queste crisi le ho vissute quasi tutte, perché sono partito da Napoli, dove mi sono laureato, stagiaire alla Commissione Europea, e sto lì da oltre 4 decenni. Ebbene, posso dirvi che, avendo vissuto, approfondito queste crisi, posso affermare senza dubbio di smentita che di tutte le commissioni europee il presidente Barroso è quello che ha dovuto affrontare più crisi, ben 3, e soprattutto affrontare anche sfide epocali. Le enumero molto brevemente. La prima crisi, il ripudio della Costituzione europea, firmata il 29 ottobre 2004, solennemente in Campidoglio. Ebbene, francesi e olandesi, pochi mesi dopo l'insediamento del presidente Barroso alla Commissione Europea, c'è il ripudio da parte di francesi e olandesi. È una crisi terribile, perché il Trattato di Lisbona, la Costituzione, tra l'altro, aveva come obiettivi fondamentali quello di restituire all'Europa il suo ruolo di leader in campo internazionale. Il presidente Barroso svolge tutto il suo impegno tenace, continuo, perché questo si trovi rimedio a questa crisi. Si trovi rimedio perché con il ruolo di leader europeo nel mondo, l'Europa avrebbe ripreso il suo ruolo. Ricordiamoci che a Yalta l'Europa era stata una sorta di comparsa, direi addirittura bottino di guerra, che Roosevelt e Stalin si erano spartito, dividendo l'Europa in 2 entità geopolitiche mai esistite, Europa dell'Est e Europa dell'Ovest. E questi popoli rientrano in Europa e, come osserva Milan Kundera, ritrovano l'Europa, tornano a casa. La seconda crisi dopo la Costituzione, e si arriva quindi al Trattato di Lisbona grazie al tenace impegno del presidente Barroso. Ecco perché gli va riconosciuto che il ruolo che ha svolto è stato determinante, e io ritengo che sia stato un giusto e meritato riconoscimento storico che il Trattato di Lisbona sia stato firmato nel paese dal quale lui proviene. La seconda crisi e il no referendario a questo nuovo trattato di Lisbona, che aveva ripreso sostanzialmente tutti, direi, punti fondamentali, le disposizioni che avrebbero consentito all'Europa di andare avanti, punti sostanziali, le politiche erano tutte lì. C'è questo no referendario irlandese, come sapete i trattati vanno firmati all'unanimità, e quindi questo bloccava di nuovo tutto, rischiava di fare del Trattato di Lisbona un secondo fallimento dopo la Costituzione. L'impegno del presidente Barroso è totale. Va personalmente in Irlanda a denunciare una campagna pubblicitaria che non conosco spudoratamente più menzognera. Pensate che aveva un eurofobo multimilionario, l'aveva finanziata sostenendo che il Trattato di Lisbona aboliva la neutralità dell'Irlanda, imponeva il divorzio, legalizzava l'aborto. Pensate queste cose agli irlandesi cosa potevano provocare. Il presidente Barroso va lì, sono menzogne, gli irlandesi ne prendono coscienza di questa sfrontata disinformazione e con un successivo referendum dicono sì al Trattato di Lisbona. La terza crisi è la crisi economico-finanziaria che adesso stiamo attraversando, una crisi planetaria, non europea, che il professore e presidente Barroso avrà modo di illustrare. Ma comunque sinora dei risultati importanti sono stati raggiunti, risultati forse poco conosciuti, soprattutto nel nostro paese. Personalmente io non noto tutto, anche questa crisi sarà superata e l'Europa ne trarrà i necessari insegnamenti per rafforzarsi e potenziarsi. Oltre a queste tre crisi, il presidente Barroso ha dovuto affrontare delle sfide epocali. Pensiamo alla prima. Entrano nell'Unione Europea 10 nuovi Stati membri, che diventano poi successivamente 13, il doppio degli Stati membri, quasi il doppio degli Stati membri esistenti, 15, ma i 15 erano entrati in uno spazio di 44 anni. Aggiungiamo poi a questo che si trattava di popoli che per 40 anni avevano subito la penetrazione sovietica, l'acculturamento sovietico, e occorreva gestire questo processo di portata michelangioresca. Ronchey lo definisce un processo di portata geopolitica e geoeconomica che non ha precedenti nella storia, ma anche nell'immaginazione stessa. La seconda sfida è che con l'entrata di questi nuovi paesi occorre, è chiaro, creare condizioni di sicurezza nell'Europa dei 15. Ecco perché il presidente Barroso si batte soprattutto per uno spazio di libertà, giustizia. Si parlava ieri di giustizia, quante decisioni sono state prese nel campo della giustizia penale, civile, decisioni europee fondate sul principio del mutuo riconoscimento, quindi di sicurezza e giustizia, diritti fondamentali, uno spazio quindi di 500 milioni di abitanti, più delle popolazioni degli Stati Uniti e Russia messi insieme, che beneficiano oggi di questo spazio. La terza sfida, con la riunificazione est-ovest, l'Europa deve affrontare una nuova geopolitica, perché con l'entrata dei 13 paesi dell'est in Europa abbiamo dei nuovi vicini. Erano dei vicini che molti europei conoscevano poco e ritenevano assolutamente diversi da loro e estranei alla loro storia millenaria. Pensa ai popoli del Caucaso meridionale, all'Ucraina, alla Moldavia, alla Bielorussia. Diventiamo i nostri vicini di casa e come nelle buone relazioni con i vicini di casa occorre avviare un dialogo nuovo. Un dialogo politico, con quale obiettivo? Per impedire la comparsa di nuove frontiere, per avviare un processo di democratizzazione che li affrancasse definitivamente dalla cultura sovietica. La Commissione del presidente Barroso lancia una nuova strategia Europa allargata e vicinato, propone relazioni più strette, disegna il contesto, fissa gli obiettivi e soprattutto gli strumenti da utilizzare. Gli storici non potranno dimenticare questo decennio travagliato decennio di crisi, di sfide, di conquiste. Un decennio che ha visto il presidente Barroso gestire da protagonista con realismo politico, con saggezza, ma soprattutto con visione, una visione fondata sui valori della nostra europeità, una visione che ha contribuito a fare della nostra Europa, perché siamo noi l'Europa, non un'entità terza, estranea, a fare della nostra Europa un modello di civiltà umanista verso il quale tendono un numero sempre più crescente di paesi del mondo, un modello di civiltà umanista che fa della nostra Europa l'artefice di un mondo migliore. Grazie.
Ascoltiamo la lectio magistralis del presidente Barroso.
Voglio ringraziare l'Università Benincasa per questo invito, il rettore D'Alessandro, il professor Salvatore e il professor Matera per le loro gentili parole. Sono molto contente di essere qui a Napoli in un incontro dedicato alla cultura e alle idee nel cuore del Mediterraneo e quindi dei valori fondamentali della nostra europeità, rispetto della dignità umana, democrazia e libertà, valori ereditati dalla cultura ellenica e da questa trasmessi all'Europa proprio attraverso uno dei primi insediamenti della Magna Grecia, Neapoli. Una città che mi ha accolto con la sua bellezza e con il profondo senso di ospitalità dei suoi abitanti. Sono stato ovviamente molte volte in Italia, amo questo paese, la sua immensa ricchezza artistica e la sua storia, a volte tormentata, che lo rende unico in Europa. Qui a Napoli, dove sono stato solo molti anni fa, la prima volta, mi sento oggi nel cuore dell'Italia e dell'Europa, mi sento a casa. Purtroppo ho dovuto cambiare all'ultimo momento il programma della mia visita a Napoli, devo rientrare già questo pomeriggio. Mi dispiace moltissimo, in particolare perché non ho potuto visitare il progetto STRAIN, che è una chiara dimostrazione di come l'Italia meridionale possa essere una piattaforma interessante per creare reti di eccellenza tra università, centri di ricerca e imprese. E tutto grazie a fondi europei che hanno reso questo progetto possibile e permesso a Napoli di proiettarsi verso il futuro, costruendo sulla sua gloriosa tradizione accademica del passato. Ieri sono stato a Pompei e ho potuto constatare la ricchezza culturale di questa parte d'Europa fin dall'antichità. E ora, se permettete, continuo in inglese, perché non ho una conoscenza approfondita della lingua italiana. I've done my best. I hope that you have understood what I said. And let me now switch to English. Yes, these have been 10 extremely challenging years for the European Union. As it was said, probably the most difficult times since the beginning of the European integration, the 50s of the last century. We had not only the constitutional crisis, with the no votes in the referenda in France and the Netherlands. We had the financial and sovereign debt crisis, and most recently we had this political and military crisis between Russia and Ukraine. I can tell you, there was one day of calm in my 10 years as President of the European Commission. When we think about those 10 years, and we want to make a kind of a bilan ask ourselves, is Europe now stronger or weaker? I will try to demonstrate during my conference today that I believe we are now better prepared to face the very important challenges of globalization, so I believe we are now stronger. First of all, the constitutional crisis. You remember that after the no votes in France and Italy, many opinions were expressed in the idea that it would be impossible to solve the institutional issue. But we, the European Commission, did not give up. And in fact, after some time, I proposed an idea. It was to have not immediately a new treaty, but to have a declaration that could try to put together the member states of the European Union and create a consensus for a new treaty that could, on the essential parts of it, keep the innovations that were proposed by the constitutional treaty. To do that, this is the first time I'm saying that publicly, I was inspired by the Messina Declaration. Because the Messina Declaration was also after a political crisis in Europe. After all, the non-ratification of the constitutional treaty was not the first crisis of that time. As it was brilliantly said, Jean Monnet, in fact, said once, l'Europe sera l'association de réponse à des crises. And this was, I think, confirmed during these last 10 years. And that's why I proposed a statement, declaration, that was afterwards signed in Berlin by myself as President of the Commission, by Chancellor Merkel, that at that time was the President in office of the Council, and by the then President of the European Parliament, Hans-Gert Pöttering. And in Berlin it was very important because it was the first time we had all the member states saying after the no vote in the treaty, constitutional treaty, that they were ready to go forward in European integration. And then, finally, we solved this constitutional crisis with the Lisbon Treaty, that in fact keeps most of the acquis that was presented in the constitutional treaty. Then we had to face the financial crisis. Because there are some aspects that are still today very much in discussion, I will address this after some thoughts. Let me briefly speak about this last crisis between Russia and Ukraine. What happened was extremely important from a geopolitical nature. We have a country that is a neighbor country of the European Union that wants to be closer to us. In fact, successive governments in Ukraine have asked the European Union to become members of the European Union. Ukraine. We could not. They are not prepared for that. We could not offer them membership, but we could offer them a political association and economic integration program. And we have negotiated during 5 years the association agreement with them. At the end, after they had initialed the agreement, they were not able to sign the agreement because of pressure from Moscow. What should we do? Should we accept that a country in Europe, a sovereign country, cannot decide its own will? We took a principled position, and in fact, after very important developments, we have signed the association agreement with Ukraine. They have ratified the partnership agreement with us. And at the same time, we are dealing with Russia to try to solve some of the concerns expressed by Russia. And the Commission is even mediating in some of those matters, including on energy. So I believe it was important to have all the countries of Europe united in a strong, principled position regarding that conflict. And now let's think about the financial and sovereign debt crisis. Because I believe it's one of those areas where there are many misconceptions, prejudices, stereotypes, and ideas that simply do not correspond to the truth. First of all, this crisis was not created by Europe. I say this because I know that in some parts of the public opinion there is the perception that Europe is to some extent responsible for this crisis. The crisis started in the United States with the Lehman Brothers collapse, and it contaminated our financial sector. So it was a crisis of the financial sector initially, but it became also in Europe, because of the high-level public debt of many of our countries, became a sovereign debt crisis. And because some of our countries have lost, in the period before, competitiveness, they had some structural problems of lack of competitiveness. Some of those countries were especially hit by the crisis. Not only those that have to request for adjustment program, like Greece, Ireland, Portugal, and later Cyprus, but also, let's be honest about it, Spain, Italy, and even France at some time were very much under heavy pressure of the markets. The markets entered in panic, and so we had an emergency situation, and we had to respond to that situation. If you ask me, would you have preferred a more detailed answer, a comprehensive, older response? Of course I would. The European Commission was always in the avant-garde, trying to have as much as possible a consensus among our member states so that we could have this kind of response. But let's not forget one thing. The European Union is a union of free democratic countries. We cannot take a decision by diktat, and we should not take it even if we could in Europe, because we are democracies. And the problems in Europe, if you want to be open about it, in terms of financial culture, are very diverse. The differences, they are not only between Finland and Greece. The difference are the differences between France and Germany. So, can you really imagine how difficult it was in those moments of panic for the Commission and for myself to try to bring the countries to a cooperative attitude? We started immediately with a proposal, the creation of instruments that did not exist before, like the EFSM, a community instrument using structural funds, the most we could, to support Greece and other countries that needed, like Portugal and Ireland, that needed that support. But immediately there were divisions among our member states. They said, no more money under community instruments, let's do it by loans that we can afterwards put somehow in a European mechanism. And so after many twists and turns, and in a process that was some kind of muddling through, an incremental process, it was possible to respond to the crisis. And in fact, there were programs of adjustment supported by the European Union, and to some extent also by the IMF, that avoided some of our countries literally to be bankrupt, because they were very close to that situation. So I think we can say that solidarity was expressed through the mobilization of unprecedented sums of money. Before the crisis, we were speaking about millions or hundreds of billions. The unit after the crisis is a billion. And we have mobilized many billions to support the countries in difficulty. So in fact, the response was a comprehensive one, creating instruments that we were not having. And now we have, for instance, the European Stability Mechanism, that is a kind of European IMF, with 700 billion euros. The system of governance of the European Union that is now much more integrated, namely for the euro area. Also, a new, complete set of regulation in financial sector. by the initiative of the Commission, around 40 pieces of legislation for the banking stability from all the areas of the financial sector. And we are now the #1 in the world in terms of the advance or progress of regulation and supervision in the financial markets. And also the creation of the banking union. Let me just briefly tell you about the banking union. When the Commission mentioned for the first time banking union, I received some phone calls from the capitals of Europe saying, why are you speaking about the banking union? We cannot have a banking union. It is not in the treaty. It's true it's not in the treaty, the banking union. But I said, but to fulfill the goals, objectives of the treaty, we need a banking union. We need the European Central Bank to take responsibility on the supervision of some of our banks in Europe. Because we have seen in the past, unfortunately, that national supervision was not sufficiently credible. And now we have basically the banking union established. So, my dear friends, when we look at the crisis and the response to the crisis, we have to look not to, I'm sorry to say it in front of some journalists, not only to the front page of every day about the crisis, the differences, the oppositions, the cleavages among our countries. No. We have to look at the trend. And if you compare the European Union today and the European Union 2004, the answer is clear. Today, we have much more instruments. We are more integrated. The European Commission has more competencies now than before the crisis. The European Central Bank has competencies that will be unimaginable some years ago. So, in spite of all the difficulties, in spite of all the divergences and the oppositions, the way was for more integration, not less integration. Today, the European Union has more instruments in terms of economic governance. For instance, the European Commission having the power to reject, if needed, national budgets. For the banking union, for the new instruments of support to countries in difficulty. In all these areas, today, we are more and not less integrated. And you probably remember, at least some of you that have followed that closely, that during all these moments, the crisis, the European Commission was always asking for more and not less integration. I've used, by the way, an expression in Latin, non progrede est de regrede. If we don't make a progress, we will go backwards. In some moments, dramatic moments, I was saying to my colleagues of the European Council, from Chancellor Merkel to Prime Ministers of Greece, including Papandreou and Samaras, that they should do more. That the surplus countries and the richer countries should do more in terms of solidarity. And that the most vulnerable countries should do more in terms of responsibility. That has been the consistent, coherent position of the European Commission during all these difficult moments. Sometimes I've done that privately. Because the situation was a situation very market sensitive. But we could not add to the panic of the markets more alarm. And in fact, I wanted to avoid what for me was perceived as the cacophony of many leaders, each one presenting their own idea about this situation. So the Commission has acted with a great sense of responsibility. But I can tell you, sometimes even publicly, I have to make those appeals to the ethics of European responsibility. Because I believe that some governments were not doing enough. The reality is that we have avoided the worst. Different. Less than 2 years ago, I've invited the chief economists of the most important banks operating in Europe. And I've asked them, how many of you think that Greece will stay in the euro? Almost all. All of them except one said Greece cannot stay in the euro. Greek exit is unavoidable. I've asked them, how many of you think that we are going to be able to keep the euro united? Half of them said it's impossible. You need to split. Spain, Italy will not be able to stay in the euro. Half of them. Chief economists, so the people that really manage the public opinion in the markets, they write investment letters to their clients. And we have shown that they were wrong. We have shown many economists in Europe and the United States that they were wrong when they were predicting the end of the euro. Europe has shown its extraordinary resilience. And so I'm proud of the work that we have done. Yes. Because I remember well many difficult moments I had. For instance, in the G20, when we, myself and my colleagues from Europe, we had to respond to President Obama, to President Putin, to President Xi of China. I'm sorry, at that time it was President Wu of China, to different prime ministers of Japan, to President Dilma of Brazil, to many others. They were asking us, can you do something to avoid the collapse not only of the euro area, but of the global economy? Because Europe, in spite of all the difficulties, remains the #1 economy in the world. The GDP of our countries together is bigger than the United States, and much, much bigger than the Chinese, even if the Chinese are growing at spectacular rates. So Europe is the biggest economy in the world. By far the biggest trade partner in the world. So, what happened in Europe could have a devastating effect in all the world. And we were saying to them, sometimes they were listening to us with a kind of complacency, sometimes with some cynicism. We would tell them, yeah, yes, we are going to get out of the crisis. Yes, we will be able to restore stability in Europe. And we have done it. If you think about the situation of our countries, including Italy, in terms of access to the markets, some time ago and how they are now, it's amazingly different. Yes, we are out of the instability of the financial crisis, but we are not yet out of the crisis. We cannot say we are out of the crisis when we have such high levels of unemployment, especially young people. So we have to solve the issue of growth. But without solving the issue of stability, it will not be possible to solve the growth problem. And that's why also in growth, I want to make it clear, the position of the European Commission has been and is that we should have a comprehensive response. It is not, as sometimes suggested, and I think it's a caricature, and it is baseless, when people say that the European Union is only focused on austerity. No. By the way, I think that fiscal consolidation was absolutely unavoidable. We have done basically the right things. Now, to restore confidence, especially the most vulnerable countries, they were able to show that they were determined to control some of their public deficits. This is extremely important when we think the panic and alarm situation where we found ourselves. But, at the same time, we have said we need investment and we need structural reforms. About structural reforms, it's quite obvious. The countries that are responding better to the crisis are those who have done the structural reforms before. Because some of our countries have lost competitiveness, and so they need to become more flexible. They need to be able to attract private investment. And because of problems with the public administration, with the taxation system, with the education, and many other matters, the reality is that some countries have lost competitiveness, and this was already happening before the crisis. The crisis has aggravated the issue, but it was there before. That's why I believe the key for growth today is to speed up some of the structural reforms so that we can recover our competitiveness. But we have also said we need more investment. That is why the European Commission was fighting for more ambitious budget at European level. We did not get what we wanted. Because as you know, we need unanimity of the member states to accept the multi-financial framework, the budget for the euro. Nevertheless, the result is, I think, acceptable. We have 1,000 billion euros for these 7 years, 2004-2020. Only less than 6% is for, let's say, the functioning of the European Union. All the rest is for investment in our regions, in our cities, in our universities, in our agriculture. only Italy will receive more than 40 billion euros. I hope that money is going to be well used. And that Italy will be able to spend the money, to invest that money in the regions, in universities, in all areas that are so important for the future of this country. And I have to tell you once again that the Commission myself were on the side of those that were in favor of more cohesion, not less cohesion. I was participating in the meetings of so-called cohesion countries, not only new member states, but for instance my own country, Portugal or Greece. I also received one phone call of one prime minister, one head of government of one of the richest countries saying, look, José Manuel, why are you going to those cohesion countries meeting? You are president of the European Commission, not only from a group. Yes. I said, I'm president of the Commission that represents all the European Union, but I think cohesion is a fundamental principle of all the European Union. And we need more, not less cohesion. Economic, social, territorial cohesion in Europe. So at the end, we've got a result. It is not so ambitious as I wanted, as the Commission and the European Parliament wanted, but okay, that was the budget that is possible. Now let's make the most of it. And we have introduced also some modernization aspects in that budget, namely smart specialization, the Connecting Europe facility, to have more networks at European level, pan-European level, for energy, for transport, for digital. I will not now go in detail, but I think we have a lot to do with that budget. I've also asked for more money from the IB, European Investment Bank. It was not easy. The member states took some time, because they are the stakeholders, to accept the increase of capital of the IB. Finally, they have accepted it. And we have proposed some new innovative programs, like, for instance, the blending of the loans of the IB with structural funds. Unfortunately, the response there was not as ambitious as we wished. I've proposed project bonds. So to have bonds, obligations, as obligation in French, to finance important projects in Europe. Unfortunately, the member states were not ready to accept more than pilot phase for that. Okay, and we have developed that pilot. I hope that today there is a new consensus to do more in terms of investment. My successor, Jean-Claude Juncker, is speaking about the program of 300 billion euros of investment. I hope it will be adopted by the member states. And some of the ideas that they've put before could be used for that, namely this one regarding the blending of the European Investment Bank funding with European Union grants, so loans and grants. And I could go more in detail. So, the response of the European Union has been and is fiscal consolidation certainly, because without that, we could not avoid the melting down of some of our economies because of lack of credibility in terms of controlling the deficits, fiscal consolidation, and basically that effort has been done. But structural reforms and investment. And of course, the reform of the European Union system in terms of governance, and not only European Union system governance, but also the financial regulation and some matters where we have been acting. For instance, the internal market, where, by the way, I've asked my friend Manuel to come with some ideas that have now been developed in terms of deepening the internal market. Because the reality is, dear friends, that still today, there are a lot of resistance coming from some capitals to deepen our internal market. And our internal market is the best platform for growth. One point I'd like to make that sometimes is forgotten. 2004, the year I became President of the Commission, we were 15 countries. Today we are 28. It means that we have almost double the membership of the European Union, and I think that's a great thing. Now we have a continental dimension for Europe. And we have shown how resilient we are. Even in the deepest crisis that we had since the beginning of European integration, we were able to double the membership of the European Union. From 15 to 25, then 27, and now 28. And the euro area, that many were predicting that would collapse. All those prophets of doom, including very important senior economists, were saying that it will not happen, the euro area, as it launched. On the 1st of January, we are going to welcome the 18th member, Lithuania, that's going to join the euro area. So please look at the trend. The reality is that the European Union has shown its extraordinary resilience. And I think it's still admirable that in this moment of crisis, instead of closing, instead of just looking inwards, the European Union was able to be open. It was our initiative, the creation of G20. I went to Camp David with President Sarkozy, that at that time was the president in office of the Council, to convince then President George W. Bush of the United States to organize the first G20 summit. Initially, they were not very enthusiastic, the Americans, because they feared to be blamed that the crisis happened in Wall Street. The crisis happened in Lehman Brothers. But eventually they have agreed. And then we started what I believe is one of the biggest, if not the most important, structural transformation in the world in economic terms, the creation of G20 at level of heads of state and government, where Italy is an important member. That was important to avoid a return to full protectionism, as it happened in the crisis in the 30s, last century. To have at least some principles for a financial framework for stability and growth, fight against tax evasion and tax fraud. It was a position and the initiative of the European Union. It was in the G20 in London, and also a more ambitious regulation and supervision of the financial sector. These were ideas that were put forward at the global level by the European Union, not by others, by the European Union, sometimes with strong resistance, either from some developed economies or some emerging economies. But it was the first time that we had in the same forum developed economies like the European ones, United States, Japan and Canada, and emerging economies like China, India or Brazil, for instance. So I think it was something that also the European Union should be proud of. And also in trade. In trade we were able to, after the failure of the development round, to have an aggressive trade agenda that we are now pursuing. Some of those agreements are already concluded, from the agreement to Korea, Singapore, Canada. Others we are now negotiating, from Japan to the United States, the famous transatlantic trade and investment partnership. So basically, we were able to keep Europe open and at the same time united. And I believe we made it stronger by preparing it better for the globalization age. Now, you may say to me, oh, Mr. Barroso, we are being too optimistic. Apparently everything went well. No, I'm not saying that. I want to tell you very frankly and very objectively what I think about Europe. Now I'm leaving the European Commission leadership in some days from now. My level of sincerity is increasing day by day. The reality is that something did not go well. We have seen the results of the European Parliament. I know that Eurosceptics, sometimes Europhobe forces are going up. I know that there is a lot of pessimism regarding Europe. I know that many people that are strong believers in the European project are disappointed, are pessimistic, are even losing some of their confidence. And I take those signals very seriously. But at the same time, I have not only to put the record straight in what remains European action, but I have to explain that for Europe to recover its enthusiasm, we need to do more at European but also at national level. Dear friends, it's not fair. What has happened very often? In Europe, when things go well, the national politicians say it's their merit. When things go wrong, they say it's the fault of Brussels or the fault of the European Union. There is what I have called the nationalization of political success and the Europeanization of failure. And it's simply not true. We need to understand that the European Union is not a foreign power. The European Union is the result of our collective will. The European institutions, they are certainly not perfect, they can do better, but alone they cannot do it on behalf of the governments, on behalf of our country. The European put things back on track? Or is it easier to put always the blame in the European Union? That's the important point. Because the European Union is not a foreign power. The European Union is what collectively the member states have decided. The treaties were approved unanimously by the governments. They were not an imposition of the Commission. The Commission could not impose, even if we wanted, and we certainly do not want, impose any kind of project against the will of the member states. The Commission has the right of initiative. But all the legislation that was approved by the European Union, all of it was approved by the governments, and the most important pieces unanimously, not even by qualified majority. So I think this sense of ownership is very important, and I'm making that public very clear. We need stronger commitment by our national capitals, from politicians, not only from the government, but from the opposition. Because when those that are traditionally pro-European are now giving up to the extremist forces, from the extreme right, sometimes the extreme left, to populism, to simplification, when they have not the courage to show their convictions, when sometimes they are even accepting some of those arguments instead of fighting against them, of course we have a problem of ownership. And today there is a problem of ownership of European product in many of our quarters in Europe. So my appeal to all those leaders, the so-called mainstream parties, from the center left to the center right, is to get out of the comfort zone and to be fighting for Europe with rational arguments, explaining how important it is for our generation and for the future generations. Explaining that this dream that was created by the founding fathers is not just about the past. I felt that when I was together with my colleagues from the European Union receiving the Nobel Peace Prize 2 years ago in Oslo. What a great moment it was. European Union receiving the Nobel Peace Prize because it means how important it is the European Union as a project of peace. But it is not just to celebrate the past, to celebrate the future. We need a stronger Europe to defend our interests and our values in the age of globalization. Our countries, even the biggest ones, even Germany or France or Italy or UK alone, they will not have the leverage, the strength, dimension to discuss equal footing with the United States of America or with China. But together we are the first economic power in the world. Why should we not be the first political power in the world if we want it? That's a question of having confidence in ourselves. But then, foreign policy, defense policy, depends on the will of our capitals. Depends on not only some of them, most of them, in some cases all of them, we need to have a more coherent foreign policy, to have a more resolute defense policy, so that we can project our values and defend our interests. And that's my conclusion difference. Europe is about values. Europe is about values. Of course we need internal market. Without an internal market, we don't have the basis of economic integration that makes our future together. But, as Jacques Delors said once, no one falls in love with an internal market. We need internal market, but we need more. We need this passion for Europe. We need this emotional link with Europe. We need to understand that Europe is the biggest project in the world ever of jointly exercise of sovereignty. Not losing the sovereignty of each country. We are not ready to do that. Our countries, some of them are extremely old, like mine. They are not ready to give up sovereignty to us, but sharing sovereignty. Understanding that, using that together, we are much more influential, that indeed we can have more power sharing our sovereignty, the power that counts in economic terms, in political, in diplomatic terms. And that's why our values are the values of human dignity, the values of peace, of freedom, of justice. And with all the imperfections we have in the European Union, it is in Europe that you find probably the most decent societies in the world, with rights of human beings, a man, a woman, a child. This is why, for instance, so many people were fighting in Ukraine, waving the European flag during many, many months, because they believe in European values. So if outside of Europe they believe in the European Union, outside of the European Union they believe in European values, let's expect that we ourselves continue to believe them, on them, and not only continue to believe to fight for them. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Bellissimo oratore, ha fatto una difesa molto appassionata anche di questi 10 anni di guida della Commissione. A me tocca fare un po', diciamo, la parte del cattivo. Dalla sua analisi, Presidente, diciamo, le responsabilità della crisi vengono divise in parti diseguali, da crack finanziario americano, il contagio europeo, a poi, diciamo, alle politiche o alle non politiche riformiste dei governi nazionali. Però quanto secondo lei, su questo è stato un po', diciamo, evasivo, quanto, diciamo, le gabbie che l'Europa ha dato ai paesi nazionali ha impedito, diciamo, una uscita dalla crisi più rapida? Noi vediamo dopo tanti anni che gli Stati Uniti sono fuori, i dati, tutti gli indicatori americani sui principali asset sono positivi, sono ritornati a essere positivi, mentre tutti gli indicatori europei, sino quelli della Germania, se penso alla produzione industriale tedesca, oltre a quella del, diciamo, rapporto deficit-PIL che ci riguarda molto da vicino, quelli della disoccupazione, sono tutti in negativo e tendono a negativo. L'Italia dopo molti anni è tornata in recessione, lo sarà anche nel prossimo trimestre. Allora si parla di flessibilità, passaggio dal rigore alla crescita attraverso maggiore flessibilità. Sembra più una suggestione politico-mediatica, perché non è chiaro come si traduca questa maggiore flessibilità e come questo possa andare a beneficio dei paesi nazionali. E gli aggiungo un piccolo particolare, ha usato un'espressione molto efficace secondo me: l'Europa non è una potenza straniera, però sempre più trasversalmente nei paesi, diciamo, membri viene vissuta così. In questo c'è un'altra responsabilità vostra.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to answer in English. I understand perfectly your question, but I cannot answer. Not yet. In Italian, if you keep inviting me to come, I will learn better beautiful Italian. First point, I want to confirm. The crisis was not created by the European Union. It was created by irresponsible behavior in the financial markets and the irresponsible behavior of governments that have accumulated excessive public debt. Look at Iceland. Iceland was in fact the first country to go bankrupt. Iceland is not a member of the European Union. So how can someone say that the crisis was created by the European Union? Some say, oh, it's created by the euro. False, completely false. Latvia, Hungary, Romania, Estonia, all those countries, they were not members of the euro yet, namely Latvia, and they were very much affected by the crisis. And afterwards, they were able to respond to the crisis successfully. And by the way, now they are members of the euro. Latvia, that has implemented a program that was at least as demanding as the program of Greece, is now growing substantially higher and is now a member of the euro. This is to show to you that contrary to what is sometimes said, namely by Eurosceptic voices, the responsibility of the crisis does not lie with the European Union or with the euro area. I'm sure everybody agrees that it was not the European Commission responsible for what happened in Lehman Brothers. Now, your second point. You say, but others are doing better now in terms of growth. For instance, the United States. It is true. Now, the question is, do you believe this happens because of the European Union policies or because of national policies? Do you believe that the countries in Europe that are growing less than the United States are ready to have, for instance, the flexibility of the labor market the United States have? Why? Let's ask ourselves the difficult questions. Why the investment in Italy last year was a record low? Italy lost, in terms of cost competitiveness regarding Germany, 35%. So, if you want to discuss seriously why some countries are doing better than others, those who are doing better are those who have regained competitiveness. Those who are doing worse are those who have lost competitiveness. Basically, this is the point. Of course, it's just this main point, but not the only one. And in fact, why Ireland, Greece, Portugal, but to some extent Spain and Italy were the most affected when the crisis started? Spain, for instance, had not a very high public debt. The reason why they were more affected was because they were the countries exactly that were losing more competitiveness before. And that explains why the market confidence was lower regarding this country. It's an almost perfect mathematical correlation between the loss of competitiveness and the situation regarding the confidence of the markets regarding the country. This is why the United States are doing better. The United States, first of all, are one country. We are 28 countries. They have a single market for the United States. We have now a single market in Europe for goods. But we don't have a single market for energy, in spite of all the efforts we have been doing. We don't have a single market for digital. It's absurd. In Europe, every country has its own rules for digital. Sometimes, if you are in Belgium and you want to buy something from Luxembourg, through the internet, the rules are completely different. And the future market will be digital. So we need to have a fully integrated internal market in digital. And this is one of the reasons why the competitiveness in Europe, especially in some countries, is lower than in the United States. That's why some of our companies go from Europe to the United States. I've asked some leaders of Italian companies, some of multinationals, why are you going to go to the United States? One of them, I will not say his name, but you can guess. And he said, I'm going to the United States because I don't accept the labor legislation in Italy. And I'm much better in the United States. This is the reality. So either we want to face this reality or not. But if our countries want to be more competitive, they have to make some reforms. By the way, I want to praise the current government of Italy just now because of the Jobs Act. I think this is a very important point. And this is the reason that has nothing to do with European policy. Nothing. Because this is a national responsibility. Are we able or not to make reforms in our countries to become more competitive in terms of public administration, in terms of labor market, in terms of tax system, energy? Italy has the highest taxes on energy in Europe. It's also very easy to say, oh, it's because of the European. No, it's not. The taxes on energy in Italy are higher than in Europe. Of course, in that case, your companies are losing competitiveness. Once again, that has nothing to do with European. It is a national responsibility. Look, I'm saying that because I'm your friend. Because I think the duty of a friend is not just to say nice things, but to say the reality. And this country that has such a great potential can do much more if it has the courage and determination over time to make this reforms. And that's why you have growth in the United States and you have a recession in Italy. Because they are more competitive and they've made reforms that Italy has not yet done. Oh, you also asked me about the responsibility of the European institutions. Of course we share that responsibility. I want to make it very clear. I'm not saying that our response was perfect. Probably because of some, let's say, lack of competence in our part. I don't want to say that the fault is only on our governments. No. We have not done everything perfect. Far from that. But I want to say with equal conviction that the line that we have designed was the right one.
And then in any serious bilan, any serious effort, has to consider that we are living very exceptional, unprecedented crisis. And that's what I ask to all the critics, to be honest and objective in the evaluation. And certainly, one factor, important factor, is that we are 28 countries. At that time, we were 27 of the crisis. And it was not easy to have a common response, but all the governments, all the responses, for instance, in the adjustment program for Greece, Portugal, Spain, Spain also had an adjustment program for the bank sector, as you know, and Cyprus, the decisions were taken unanimously in the euro area. That's why I'm a little bit sad when I see some governments speaking as the European Union as if they had not taken those decisions. I don't think it's right. I don't think it is fair. When you vote in the Council and we vote for a program and then you go back to your country and say, oh, it's Brussels. No, it was not Brussels. I'm sorry. It was a collective decision. And so those governments should have the courage to say, we were there and we voted those decisions. And not to put only the blame on Germany. Because if they think they have another position, they should vote on another sector. If not, they are only confessing their powerless. Leur aveu d'impuissance. The European Union is not a foreign policy, a foreign power. The European Union is what we collectively do with it. And that is my message also to the European.
Con la scusa dell'amicizia, diciamo, il presidente Barroso ci maltratta un po'. Lei ha ricordato giustamente che in questi 10 anni di presidenza della Commissione stessa ha acquisito nuovi, diciamo, compiti, nuovi strumenti, tra cui quello di bocciare i bilanci degli Stati di governo. Adesso il 15 ottobre c'è la presentazione degli ultimi, non toccherà a lei esaminarli, ma insomma su Francia e Italia non ci sono per il momento previsioni ottimistiche. Secondo lei è stato giusto dare alla Commissione questo potere di bocciatura e che effetti ci potranno essere nel caso in cui la Francia, soprattutto, speriamo non l'Italia, dovessero incorrere in queste infrazioni?
First of all, I cannot make a comment on the budget of France and Italy because we have not yet received them. So I really cannot, and I think it should not be done at this moment. Now, regarding the competence given to the Commission, I think it's the only institution that can receive those powers because the Commission is independent. And I think in Europe, if we want the European Union to be something fair, where all the countries count the same, with the same dignity, we need an independent institution. If not, if we take those decisions by intergovernmental approach, it is going to be a game where the big countries count more than the others and they can't impose on the other the solution. That is not fair. We are a union based on the principles of law. So the European Commission is the referee in these matters. Not, in others we are the initiator of legislation. But regarding stability and growth pact, we are the referee. And those of you who like football or sport, you know that the referees are never popular. We have to say, this is red card or yellow card. This does not make the European Commission popular. I would prefer not to have to take those decisions. But if you want to keep the European Union as a union of law, based on the principles of law and not of arbitrary decisions, we need a supranational institution that takes sometimes difficult decisions. And I can see, and this is the European Commission.
Prima di dare il microfono e la parola agli studenti e agli ospiti di questo incontro, vi faccio un'ultima domanda. Abbiamo parlato di BCE. Il presidente della BCE Mario Draghi, un italiano, ha presentato nei giorni scorsi un piano molto ambizioso di acquisti da circa 1.000 miliardi. Un piano che però non è stato accolto molto bene dai mercati perché, come al solito, dico io, una mia opinione personale, un po' provocatoria, c'è stata una resistenza all'interno della stessa BCE da parte di un governo nazionale, in particolare della Germania, perché diciamo, il piano fosse meno aggressivo, meno forte. Volevo sapere qual è la sua opinione sul il lavoro che sta facendo Draghi e la BCE, che credo fondamentale per l'Europa, e a questo punto contenzioso con la Germania, quanto durerà, se durerà, che effetti vorrà.
First of all, two issues in fact that you are asking me, and I will not escape any one of them, not avoid. One, the ECB, another, the position of Germany. Regarding the ECB, I have been always defending, first of all, the independence of the ECB. I think it's very important that we have an independent, credible central bank. Today, the ECB is seen as obeying to one specific country, we will be lost. The credibility of the bank will be zero. So we need a bank that is independent. That's why I always avoid, before the bank taking their decisions, to say what they should do. I don't think it's appropriate. Having said this, when there have been attacks against ECB, for instance, when ECB has used some unorthodox, unconventional response to the crisis, like buying assets, I've been supporting ECB. I think ECB has not only the right to do it, but has the duty, to do it. Because the goal that is in the treaties for the ECB is to assure monetary stability. And we have today a situation in Europe where there is a fragmentation financial market, where, for instance, Italian companies or Spanish or Portuguese companies, they pay much more higher interest rates than countries like from Austria or from Germany. So I think it is the duty of the ECB to intervene to assure the proper transmission of monetary policy to the real economy. And they have all the support of the European Commission. I'm on record saying that in the European Parliament, saying that in the European Council, and I want to tell you that I think the work done by the ECB under the leadership of Mario Draghi deserves all our full support, without any ambiguity. Now, regarding Germany, I think it's unfair to say that the problems of Europe today are because of Germany, frankly. And by the way, it's when some leader says it, is in fact showing his powerless situation. It's not a great argument. At the same time, I think Germany should do more for growth in defense. And in the country-specific recommendations that we have sent to Germany last year and this year, we were clear saying that Germany should support demand. Germany has a surplus. Germany has fiscal space to do more, for instance, to invest in infrastructure, to invest in research and innovation, to invest in education. And that investment in infrastructure is a way, of course, of giving more strength to the German economy, but also to support the euro area. Because we have to look at the euro area as an integrated area. There is a problem of supply. That's why economic reforms are needed for companies. But there is also today a problem of demand. And we need to stimulate demand, namely those countries that have the fiscal space to do it. So in the country-specific recommendation that we have issued regarding Germany, we have been very clear about it. Now, IMF and others are saying the same, but we start saying that well before. And now, it's a point that people do not know. After the revision of Stability and Growth Pact, it's not just about the deficit of the Stability and Growth Pact, it's also about the macroeconomic imbalances. Today, the European Commission has the possibility to launch infringement processes against the governments that are not respecting the principles of macroeconomic balance. And in fact, we have launched these recommendations to Germany already 2 years ago. And I think Germany could do more. And they are starting to do it something now to sustain demand. That would be very good for the euro area, and not only for the euro area, in terms of European growth. So, thank you for your question, because you gave me the opportunity to make it clear what is the position of the Commission. European Commission sometimes is perceived in some Southern European countries. I come from Portugal, so I know well how this is, as being too much in favor of fiscal rigor. Yes, we are for fiscal rigor, but at the same time we are for more investment, more structural reforms. So we are in fact recommending to the countries that were very vulnerable to the crisis to do their homework, but we are also telling the richer countries those who have fiscal space to do more too in terms of solidarity. And so the position of the European Commission is a very balanced and I think responsible one.
Presidente, mi consente una battuta, che la parola più bella che ha usato lei oggi, sia prima che adesso, è solidarietà. Evidentemente in tedesco non la riusciamo a tradurre.
Oh, I don't know what is the word in tedesco. I know in Polish it's solidarność. So you see how good I am in languages. But in Portuguese, if you want, in Portuguese, a Latin country like yours, solidariedade, very close to solidaridad. Solidaridad in Spanish, solidarité in France. One thing I know, without solidarity there is no European Union. And this is a very important point, whatever the language you speak, to keep in mind. Without solidarity, we cannot have a real union.
Di Suor Orsola, che ha preso delle domande e ha un microfono, quindi a te la parola.
Allora, benvenuto intanto anche a nome di tutto il comparto della comunicazione dell'università. Ci ha reso facile il lavoro perché quando c'è un personaggio simile abbiamo potuto spiegare la differenza tra ufficio stampa propositivo e quello gestionale. I giornalisti di solito li dobbiamo pizzicare, invece sono tutti presenti, anzi li ringrazio. Io ho raccolto 3 domande in sala e poi ci sono 3 illustri rappresentanti di diverse istituzioni che ne faranno altre 3. In realtà le domande sarebbero letteralmente 120 perché abbiamo invitato i 40 geogiornalisti del corso di alta formazione del Suor Orsola a misurarsi con 3 domande a testa e Mario, che ha coordinato spesso i lavori a scuola di giornalismo, sa quanto sono produttivi i giornalisti. Però iniziamo dalla Finlandia. Non ci è arrivata la domanda, ma è letteralmente presente in sala. Ringrazio un ricercatore finlandese, il dottor Laukkonen, della fondazione SDN, fondata dal professore Salvatore, che giustamente parte proprio dal tema di ricerca e sviluppo. Sono spesso molto connesse, la ricerca viene finanziata molto poco, sembra che non faccia sviluppo, invece lui ricordava che negli anni 90 in Finlandia si è partito molto da questo, in Italia succede molto poco. Cosa pensa lei di questo tema e cosa dovrebbe fare l'Europa per l'Italia su questi temi?
Thank you. It is true that Italy, in terms of research and development, is going down. In 2011, and these are the last figures I have, it was 1.25% of the GDP. So Italy is under the average in European terms regarding investment in research and innovation. Even more worrying in education, in 2011, Italy registered the 4th highest share of those who have obtained only basic education. And Italy has the lowest share of those having tertiary education. This is something I think you have to look at in Italy. To invest more in education. We are in favor of fiscal consolidation, but smart fiscal consolidation. It is not smart to cut on education, on science, and on research. This is not smart. Regarding what European Union can do, there I have to say I'm happy that it was possible, even in times of fiscal constraints, to increase the budget at European level. We have now the Horizon 2020 program that has more than 80 billion euros for these 7 years to finance research in our country. And this is an increase of 30% compared to the last 7 years. So, while the European Commission will not obtain an increase in all parts of the budget, in this matter, to be fair to our governments, it was possible to increase the support for research at European level. But that effort at European level, I repeat, 80 billion euros, has to be complemented by efforts at national level in terms of education, including university education. We are here in a very prestigious university in Napoli, and also investment in research and innovation.
Grazie intanto di questa risposta. Collegandosi su questo tema, c'è un esempio proprio a Napoli di ricerca che diventa sviluppo economico. Questo esempio è al CENGE, peraltro vicinissimo al Policlinico dove lei doveva andare oggi, un laboratorio trentennale di ricerca scientifica nel quale un gruppo di studiosi napoletani ha dato vita ad una piccola azienda, si chiama Kairos, che produce vaccini, che è stata rivenduta per 250 milioni alla Grandso. E oggi sembrerebbe essere l'azienda a cui l'Organizzazione Mondiale della Sanità chiede i vaccini per Ebola. Molti biotecnologi in sala di questo gruppo del Comitato dei Cervelli di Orizzonte 2020, anzi ringrazio il collega Manuel che ha fatto il comunicato stampa e ha ricordato di questo prodotto del Sabato delle Idee, questo comitato di 10 cervelli del Mezzogiorno che lavora alla progettualità europea. Molti mi chiedono, ma anche non addetti ai lavori, c'è grande paura per questo virus Ebola. Cosa pensa lei della diffusione del virus e quali sono le politiche che si dovrebbero mettere in campo come Unione Europea e cosa pensa di questo risultato brillante della ricerca napoletana su questo tema?
Regarding Ebola, my position is the following. I'm concerned. I'm not panicking. And I think alarm is not good. But I'm really concerned. This is a virus, one of the most serious threats we have had so far in the world. I was recently in a summit in New York, in the Marches of the United Nations, organized by Secretary General Ban, where, for instance, President Obama was also present. I discussed the issue with experts because, of course, you cannot expect me to be an expert in epidemiology, but what serious epidemiologists tell me now is that this is one of the greatest threats ever. So I'm extremely concerned. At European level, we have this network of the experts for this. They are following the situation. They say that all the measures are taken. I hope this is the case. This is a matter for experts to decide. What we as the European Commission can do is to support all the efforts to have a credible response so that we are prepared at all levels. In terms of response, we have also organized the support for the countries most affected. And we are among the biggest donors in terms of aid to the countries affected, namely Liberia, but also the other countries in West Africa. And at the same time, we are asking our governments, those who have the capacity, that have the capacity, for instance, to recover the nationals that have been infected, to do it. Because it's a logistical, technical capacity that lies with the governments. The European Commission has not the planes, we have not the technicalities to do it. So it's a very important matter, and I think we should have no complacency, and we should not relax our efforts, because it's far from being that battle against Ebola. That can be a threat not only for Africa, but also for Europe and for the rest of the world.
Intanto l'ultima domanda di quelle raccolte in sala, proprio dal gruppo dei giornalisti, era tra le 120 famose domande quella che ritornava sempre, un po' scomoda per chi riveste un ruolo diplomatico, ma sono bravi, altrimenti è una domanda che va fatta. La ribattezzerei sulla votazione internazionale del nostro Presidente del Consiglio. Cioè, molti si chiedono, tra i risultati di cui parla Renzi, della sua esperienza di governo, c'è questa presunta grande credibilità internazionale. Allora lei crede che effettivamente l'Italia sia un po' salita come peso specifico internazionale col Presidente del Consiglio, e che idea si è fatta l'Europa del governo Renzi e della gestione Renzi della politica italiana?
You spoke very quick. Can you, it's not because I don't want to answer the question. Can you just summarize more slowly, because my Italian is not perfect.
Siccome era difficile la domanda e anche imbarazzante, parlavo veloce, così pensavo che si potesse capire di meno. In 2 secondi è l'opinione di Barroso e dell'Europa sul Premier Renzi, su come sta gestendo questa fase della politica italiana, e se è vero, come dice lo stesso Renzi, che il peso internazionale dell'Italia sarebbe cresciuto grazie, come dire, alla sua operazione politica.
I'm going to be very frank as always. And you know that on the 1st of November, I will be a complete free man when I leave the office of the European Commission. So, I'm going to tell you my opinion. I think Prime Minister Renzi brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm to Italy, and this is good. We need, I'm not going to internal politics of Italy, that you have to understand. I'm not going to make choices, that's for you to decide in which party or which person you vote. But seen from Brussels, from the European Commission, in European terms, I think that Prime Minister Renzi brought energy and enthusiasm, and we need that in Italy and in Europe. So what I hope now is that Prime Minister Renzi uses these exceptional political qualities of enthusiasm and energy to make the reforms that Italy needs. Some of them have already started. I've mentioned before the Jobs Act. I think it's a courageous decision. And this is very important because, you know, politics is also about signals. There is also semiotics of politics. And from that point of view, Mr. Renzi is giving the right signals in terms of the reform. Let's hope he succeeds, because, once again, not interfering in internal politics of Italy. If he succeeds, if the government of Italy succeeds, it means that Italy succeeds. And for us, Italy is extremely important. That's why I was so sincere today. Italy is not only one of the biggest countries in Europe, it's one of the biggest economies in the world. It is impossible to say that Europe has recovered before Italy recovers. So, I think Mr. Renzi has great qualities of voluntarism. I can make you a confession, I already said it, but I can repeat it. I met him well before he was Prime Minister. I met him when he was Mayor of Florence, because I was giving a conference on Europe and Florence. And the first time I met him was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. I told him, I'm sure you are going to be Prime Minister. But I told him as well, don't be in a hurry. Because my experience, I have enough experience to recognize when there is some political vocation that is very strong, and the will of power. Sometimes people criticize the will of power. They don't like when a politician says he wants power. I think if a politician wants power for the common good, I think it's important. And I understood from the beginning that Mr. Renzi wanted power to be in the government of Europe. Now he has it, with a majority. With power comes responsibility. I hope the best for him and for Italy.
Questa risposta da uomo libero. Allora, anche nel raccogliere 3 domande in sala, intanto mi scuso con coloro che non abbiamo potuto ovviamente accontentare. Ho cercato di scegliere 3 settori tematici: la giustizia, la ricerca e l'innovazione tecnologica e i beni culturali. Partendo proprio dalla visita a Pompei di ieri, il professor Umberto Pappalardo, che è il direttore del Centro Internazionale per gli Studi Pompeiani.
Presidente, lei è iniziata la sua visita a Pompei e ne siamo molto contenti, anche perché questa università ha creato un centro di ricerca internazionale su Pompei che ha sede proprio a Pompei. La Comunità Europea ha assegnato per la salvezza di Pompei oltre 100 milioni di euro e con dei termini, delle scadenze molto brevi, si parla del 2015, e la preoccupazione è che questi soldi non possano essere spesi nei termini convenuti, anche perché l'iter burocratico è molto laborioso. E allora le trova realistico questo mio suggerimento che parte di questi fondi vengano assegnati direttamente all'università, alle università e dai centri di ricerca, in modo tale forse potrebbero anche risolversi 2 problemi: rispettare i termini convenuti e dare occupazione ai giovani studenti universitari. Grazie.
I'm afraid I cannot answer in detail your question. Why? There was recently an action plan signed by the Commission. It was Commissioner Johannes Hahn, Commissioner for Regional Policy, that came here to Pompeii several times. And now we have to, first of all, to concentrate, to focus on the implementation of that action plan. So I cannot at this stage say what happens if the plan is not implemented on time. Yes, we know that there were some delays. Yesterday in Pompeii I was accompanied by the President of the region. I've heard the very detailed explanations of the Superintendente and of the Commissario. They told me that they are able to recover some delays. So I wish the best, because once again, Pompeii is one of those great things you have in Italy. It's one of the most important places in the world in terms of cultural heritage. So we have shown our support by very important funds given to the Italian government. The Italian government is also putting part of those funds. Let's now focus on implementation, and then we'll see what happens. But I cannot at this moment apologize, but to speculate about what could be other utilizations of the money.
Grazie Presidente. Cedo la parola a Philippe Charrier, che è direttore generale del gruppo Lab, una multinazionale che si occupa di salute, medicina diagnostica e ricerca.
First of all, thank you very much for your insightful views. I'd like to go back to the financial crisis. Don't you think that this financial crisis was before all a crisis of purchasing power of the middle class? In the US, cheap credit, capital gains and housing were a way to offset a downward trend in the income of the middle class. In Europe, social benefits were a big way to offset a, again, declining trend of the middle class purchasing power. So it's my first question. My second question, how do you see, the trend of the middle class purchasing power going in Europe? Thank you very much.
Regarding your first question, frankly, I don't agree. What we have seen, for instance, in my country, in Portugal, or in Ireland, or in Spain, before the financial crisis erupted, was not at all a reduction of the purchasing power of the middle class. At least the consumption was going up extremely high. And that explains partly the bubbles, the financial bubble we had in Ireland, or the real estate bubble we had in Spain. So, okay, we can say that it was because they had no money that they were having higher consumption. In that case, I could partly agree with you, but in fact, what we have seen before the crisis in the countries most affected was a rise in consumption, a rise in pattern of life, but in some cases, losses in terms of competitiveness. And that explains, as I said earlier, why there was a panic in the markets regarding some of our countries, including, by the way, Italy, at some moment. Now, regarding the future, I expect, of course, that with the correction now of instability and with progressively implementation of the reforms and return of growth, the middle class will gain some of the lost power, purchasing power that they have lost now after the crisis. After the crisis, yes, they've lost a lot. And in some of our countries, unfortunately, because they have to raise the taxes. For instance, in my country, the middle class has been the most affected. Why? Because the government, when designing the policies, including with the Troika, were trying to safeguard to some extent the poorest classes, because they were already at very low levels. But so, in terms of taxation, those who are suffering the most, unfortunately, I would say, because they are suffering more than the highest classes. Why? Because it's easier to make the taxation on labor than on capital that goes to outside. And this explains why there is such a frustration. And that point, I think, is behind your question, and I very much agree with you. The frustration that we have today in middle classes. Middle class is a very vague concept. There are low and high middle classes. But today in Europe, there is a frustration of middle classes, especially low middle classes, because they feel that it's not fair, that they are paying more than others, namely the financial sector itself. And this explains part of the frustration and anger that we have today in Europe. That's why I believe it's very important also, progressively, to create better conditions for the recovery of the purchasing power of our middle classes.
Abbiamo lasciato l'ultima domanda alla fine sulla giustizia, così se è troppo cattiva possono pure far sgomberare la sala. Mi permetto solo una cosa: autodichiara avvocato dello Stato la Procura della Repubblica di Salerno. Mi viene in mente una cosa e così approfitto. Pure io non sarei bravo giornalista se non faccio questa domanda. Grazie a lui abbiamo fatto un bellissimo incontro iniziale sulla terra dei fuochi. Cosa pensa Barroso di questo tema e di come affronta l'emergenza rifiuti la Campania, Napoli e anche l'Italia in particolare? E poi ascoltiamo Giuseppe.
Presidente, anzitutto voglio ringraziarla per le belle parole che ha pronunciato nei confronti della mia città. Spero di rivederla quanto prima in Camera. Detto questo, ricordo una opinione molto diffusa, secondo la quale gli stranieri non investono in Italia, l'economia del mio paese non decolla perché vi è un sistema giustizia che non funziona. Molti sono propensi a dare la colpa di tutto questo soprattutto ai magistrati. Eppure di recente è emerso che i magistrati italiani in Europa sono quelli che producono di più. Ai magistrati italiani viene riconosciuto un impegno forte nell'azione di contrasto nei confronti delle mafie e di quel cancro che è la corruzione a tutti i livelli. Le chiedo, da uomo libero, come lei è, ma non solo perché il 1° novembre è vicino, qual è il giudizio dall'atto del suo osservatorio esprime sulla giustizia italiana e soprattutto quale giudizio esprime sugli indirizzi che il governo Renzi ha formulato in materia. Le dico subito che l'Associazione Nazionale Magistrati ha espresso forti riserve perché ritiene che questa politica possa indebolire il controllo di legalità, di cui invece si ha tanto bisogno in un paese come l'Italia. Grazie.
Thank you very much. First of all, you don't want me now to enter in a controversy between the Association of Magistrates and the Prime Minister of Italy, please. I don't want to enter in that controversy. What I can tell you, very openly and honestly, is my opinion in general. I don't know enough about the system in Italy. When I was a young man, I'm a lawyer. I was graduated in law. And when I was in the University of Lisbon studying law, one of the sources was the Encyclopedia del Diritto. So I've learned a lot with the great masters of Italian justice, from Roberto Ago to Santi Romano. So I've learned European law, the law also based on the great Italian jurisprudenza. So I have a great respect for the Italian tradition. Now, regarding the competence or not of magistrates, that is a debate that we have in all countries. But if you ask my opinion, the opinion we have in Europe is that the legal system of Italy, the system has done a lot of great battles, namely against the mafia. And I want to take this occasion, I'm speaking, to congratulate all those courageous magistrates that sometimes risking their own life have been able to fight the mafia. So that deserves our highest respect. And so the opinion there is about the justice in Italy is not that it is not fair, that it is not just, that it is not honest. The opinion there is that it is slow, and that explains some of the skepticism. Now, there is another issue to be discussed. Is it slow because of the people or because of the system? I personally believe that the people in all countries, there are good professionals and bad professionals. I don't like the idea of an anathema to a specific class. That's not fair. My opinion is that in all countries, from Italy to Germany, from Portugal to Finland, we have good professionals, bad professionals, and some that are more or less like that. In all systems. So, to say that the problems of a justice in one country are because the magistrates are not hardworking, I think is not fair. But I think we should look at the system. Because, for instance, in my country, and then I can say to you because I know the system well, it's also a justice that is considered very fair, independent, and credible, but extremely slow. And the reason is on some bureaucratic rules, on systems of equipment, and so on. So my answer is, yes, there is a problem in terms of delivery of Italian justice, but I will not put the blame on the magistrates that I'm sure, as a corporation, will do the best to serve their justice and their country.
Presidente, intanto che si preparano gli studenti, vi fanno le ultime due domande. Che cosa farà lei dal 1° novembre? Questo non ce l'ha detto. A parte vi ci ha trovato, diciamo, più spesso.
I have not yet decided, but the rector of your university, Mr. Alessandro, invited me to be the chair of a committee to try to save the papyrus of Ercolano. So that's one of the possibilities. I will not engage in political activity. I have now more than 30 years that I've been engaged in political activities. As my government in Portugal, I was 12 years in government. The last years as Prime Minister. I was 10 years in the Commission. I was leader of the opposition also in Portugal, so I have been many years in politics, so now I'm not going back to politics. What I'm going probably to do, I have not yet decided, but what I'm going probably to do is to have this kind of public intervention, conferences, academia, also discussing my experience regarding Europe and the world. That is probably what I'm going to do, and I hope I will have the time to accept some pro bono activities, others I have to be paid, but some pro bono activities in causes that I believe. But, I mean, my time as the Commission is, like everybody, is 24 hours a day. I have not more time. So I feel too young to go for retirement. I will not retire, but I'm going out of politics, yes, active politics.
Presentati e fai la domanda al Presidente Barroso.
Salve Presidente, mi chiamo Rosalella, sono una giornalista e un'allieva del corso di geogiornalismo che si occupa di ambiente e territorio e si tiene nella parte più a sud della Campania, nel Cilento. Lei ieri ha visitato Pompei e ha avuto modo di vedere come il turismo culturale possa essere un grande volano di sviluppo per la Campania, per l'Italia, ma presenta anche notevoli problematiche. Ora, il turismo e in particolare nel Cilento, che può avere numerose risorse come Pompei nell'archeologia, ma manca delle infrastrutture fondamentali per poterle raggiungere. Da Roma, ad esempio, io impiego circa 6 ore per poter svolgere questo corso. Qualche mese fa hanno festeggiato l'arrivo della rete 3G, internet, per far capire come appunto ci sia indietro ancora nelle infrastrutture fondamentali, sia per la mobilità che per la rete digitale. Ecco, il grande paradosso, su questo vorrei che lei rispondesse, è che l'Italia oggi non ha ancora speso 16 miliardi di fondi europei e rischia di perderli se non lo fa entro il 2015. Ora, secondo lei, com'è possibile che non si riesce a spendere questi fondi in un paese che è in forte crisi economica e che ha davvero bisogno di investimenti, come appunto lei diceva poco fa, sfruttando proprio settori strategici come il turismo e le infrastrutture?
Thank you. First of all, your point about Pompeii, tourism, archaeology. Yes, that's a challenge, we know. When we deal with cultural heritage, historic heritage so important, patrimonial heritage, so important as Pompeii, that is one of the most important places in the world in terms of heritage, and certainly in Europe. We have to find the right balance to protect the site, to avoid any kind of damage to the site, at the same time it's I think legitimate for the populations in the region to benefit from the cultural tourism. It's a great resource your country has. I think, for instance, your country is one of the most attractive in the world. You have everything in Italy. You have not only the classic, let's say, Roman civilization, you have the Etruscs, we have the Renaissance, we have the Baroque, we have the modernity. I mean, Italy, from my point of view, as a president of the Commission, I have to be impartial. But okay, I'm going to risk the accusation of not being impartial. Italy is, from a cultural heritage point of view, the richest country in the world. Number one. Certainly in Europe, and one in the world. So yes, I mean, we cannot go in any part of Italy without finding something marvelous in terms of our past. So that's a great asset also for cultural tourism. Many of the people that come to Italy don't come to go to the beaches and to take some sun. Most of them, I would say, come because Italy is extremely appealing from an art, historic, cultural point of view. Now, it's for the government of Italy, the authorities of Italy, to decide how to do these things. But I would encourage everything that has to do with creating the proper conditions of combining conservation, restoration, and, let's say, modernity, and the possibility to use those cultural goods, bene culturale, in a good sense. But the second part of your question, once again, brings me to a difficult reality that I have to share with you. Italy is, in fact, one of the lowest, one of the countries that has the lowest absorption capacity of the structural funds, and I don't understand why. I've checked the figures just before coming. The countries that are doing less well in terms of using funds in Europe are Croatia, that joined just now, Romania, Bulgaria, and Italy. I mean, it's not acceptable because your country is one of the founding members of the European Union. You should be one of the best. And in fact, in performance of using the funds, you are one of the worst after 60 years. So this shows that there are problems of management and public administration that you have to solve. I've said this to Mr. Berlusconi in the council. I said it to Mr. Monti, to Mr. Letta, and I've already said it to Mr. Renzi. Please, do something for that. Because it's a pity that a country like Italy loses the very important amounts of money because of lack of implementation. So as you see, I'm very sincere. Take that as a proof of my friendship to this great country.
Un'altra studentessa di Suor Orsola con un'altra domanda. Prego.
Buongiorno Presidente, io mi chiamo Annalisa Castellitti, sono anche iscritta al corso di giornalismo. Allora, in Italia si sente parlare tanto di riforme costituzionali e della nuova legge elettorale. Qual è il consiglio che lei si sente di dare all'Italia affinché si affermi un sistema bipolare?
This is a typical national question I cannot enter, I'm sorry. I have to respect the constitutional order of Italy. It's for you, for your democracy. We have a very strong democracy in Italy. It's for you, people of Italy, the elected democratic institutions, to decide what is the best constitutional system, what the reforms you can do in your institutions. In Europe, as you know, we have the subsidiarity principle. And so what has to be done at European level, what has to be done at national level, is a matter where I cannot give advice because it's so close to the sovereignty of Italy that I have to respect. And so it's for you to decide on that matter and for your democratic authority.
Grazie.
Presidente, prima di salutare, di lasciare la parola al rettore Alessandro per le conclusioni. Qui siamo in un'università che diciamo, è diventata storicamente nota, diciamo, ma che negli ultimi anni si è anche segnalata per questo corso di giornalismo molto bello e prestigioso. Ma qual è stato il suo rapporto con i giornalisti in questi 10 anni di presidenza della Commissione?
I'm going to be once again very frank. I respect very much independent journalism because, you know, my country was not a democracy. And there was no free media in Portugal until 1974. When I was 18 years of age, I saw the authoritarian regime crumble. I was in the streets in Lisbon when there was the revolution to put an end to the authoritarian regime. So I'm a strong believer in freedom, and freedom of the press, freedom of opinion. So this is my first point. So I like newspapers even when they criticize me. Not because I'm masochist, but because I think it's very important, freedom of opinion. Now, the second part, even more sincere. I think I am not a very good press. I have not a very good press. Probably because I'm not good in that matter. I think, for instance, my successor, Jean-Claude Juncker, has much better press than myself. And I wish him well, because I think it's good for the European Union to have a Commission President that has a good reception in the press. I do not have. Why? Well, probably because I'm not a good communicator, I don't know. I would say that one of the points, and that's a more problematic thing, regarding the European Union, is because I come from the periphery. I'm the first president of the Commission that does not come either from a big country or from the center of Europe. Luxembourg has already 3 presidents of the Commission. Congratulations. But it is because Luxembourg is the center of Europe. So, my good friend Jean-Claude Juncker is an insider. Everybody that is in that center has a predisposition in favor of him. When I came to Brussels, I did not have that. If you look at the president of the Commission so far, they were all from the founding countries or from Britain. Roy Jenkins was a very big country. I come from Portugal. Portugal is not a founding member, and it's a relatively small country. So I have to face many prejudices. As you are here in Napoli, you know, sometimes you are also the victims of the same thing. Because people in the north, they always think, oh, these guys from the south are not serious enough. I have to face the same when I arrive to Brussels. Because the people of the north say, what is this Portuguese going to do? So, my honest answer is that since the beginning, I have to face some prejudices. And this explains partly why I have not a very good media. Second is because of my fault, or my inability, or also because of my decision, I don't know, and I have to modestly accept that. But one thing I can tell you, very frankly, during these 10 years, I've given the maximum of my capacity. Very honest. I've been working night and day. Night and day. If the people of the south don't work, I'm sorry. I am from the south of Europe. I work a lot. there is no German or no Finnish that works more than myself, I have to say. So we worked a lot. We have given the best, and that's more important for me than any immediate judgment is my own conscience. And I've done my best for Europe.
Allora veramente dobbiamo ringraziare il presidente Barroso, tutta l'organizzazione per questa giornata straordinaria che la nostra università, il Sabato delle Idee, la nostra città e il nostro paese ha vissuto. Barroso lo ringraziamo per questo suo lavoro notte e giorno di 10 anni, lo ringraziamo per la franchezza con cui ha risposto alle nostre domande, lo ringraziamo per l'attenzione con cui sta valutando questa proposta che mi sono permesso di fare, l'attenzione con cui la sta valutando, solo questo, Presidente, e naturalmente lo ringraziamo anche per quello che ci ha detto in termini di fiducia ma anche in termini di attenzione ai nostri ritardi. C'è qualcosa su cui dobbiamo sicuramente intervenire, qualcosa di cui abbiamo piena consapevolezza, e forse il fatto che lui in questi 10 anni abbia dovuto dirlo a tanti Presidenti del Consiglio è una delle ragioni per le quali non riusciamo a liberarci di questo problema, perché non riusciamo ad avere una linea politica di continuità. Detto questo, credo che davvero noi tutti possiamo fare un grande applauso al Presidente Barroso per quello che ha fatto per l'Europa.